I'll call the meeting to order. We will do introductions. I will start and I'll call each voting member. And they can identify themselves. I will turn it over to Brian and he will go through everybody else. Dale Stein and Sarah. Erica.
Erica Goodman, voting
Dave.
Dave Brass, Vice Chair, voting member.
Darren.
Darren Hickling, voting member.
Thanks, everybody. Brian, you're next.
Okay. Dale, still getting a bit of an echo from you. I'm not really sure what's happening. But
I'm getting a double feedback here.
Yeah, I think if you mute your line right now, we'll go through the rest of the roll call. So.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Dale. I'm going to go through the roll call for our advisory member. Okay. Ag and Markets.
Yes, I'm here, Brian. Good morning, everyone. This is Tim.
Thank you, Tim Sweeney. CDEA.
I'm here, Chaz.
Hey, Chaz, how are you?
Good, how are you? Sorry, I had to unmute myself.
No problem. DEC.
Sarah Latessa. This is Julie Berlinski.
Thank you. I also heard Asim.
Yes, Asim is here.
Thank you so much. DOH.
Paul Kasmarzik.
Hey, Paul. Welcome. Okay, Department of State.
Kate Hogel's here. Stephanie may or may not be jumping on periodically.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Mm-hmm. Cornell University, Cows.
Hey, this is Brian Rom here. Good morning.
Hi, Brian. Good morning. Cornell Cooperative Extension. Okay. I believe Steve Shaw from ESF said he had a commitment, but I'll pause anyway in case he is on. ESF? Okay. NRCS.
Paula Bagley's here.
Hi, Paul. Welcome. And I believe I saw Scott Ryan from NYACD. Scott, are you on?
Yes, I'm on.
All right. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to quickly go through staff. Victor.
Good morning.
Good morning, Victor. PJ.
Hi, good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Ryan.
Yes, here. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Ryan. Greg.
Hello. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Ron.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Ron. Brendan.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
Good morning. Scott. Jennifer.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Ben.
Good morning.
Good morning. You found the mute button, Ben.
Yeah.
Welcome. All right. Bethany.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Bethany. Jason.
Good morning.
Good morning. Tim.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Tim. Lauren.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lauren. Am I missing anybody?
No.
Okay. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to all of our conservation districts on the line today and all members of the public. Thank you so much for joining us, and you will be given an opportunity later in the agenda to address the committee. So thank you so much. Dale, that concludes our roll call.
Excellent. Welcome, everyone. Review and approve minutes. Any additions or corrections, anyone? Motion to approve, please.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
I'll do roll call for voting. Erica?
Aye.
Dave? Dave? Voting?
Aye.
Darren?
Right.
Aye.
Approved. Thank you. Brian, correspondence?
Sure. I don't have any correspondence today to cover with the committee, so I can go right into the budget update.
Yep.
Okay. So since the last time we met, the governor's budget proposal was released around January 19th or 20th. And in that budget proposal included the Environmental Protection Fund. I did send this information out to all districts and voting members just a day or two after it was released and put on the public website. But just a few items to highlight from this budget. EPF is maintained at $300 million total. All of our programs were maintained at level funding or proposed with a small increase. So I'll just go through a couple of those, including the Agnom Point Source Program maintained at $18 million. That does include a $1 million suballocation for Cornell's IPM program, $500,000 for CCE of Suffolk County for the Long Island Nitrogen Action Plan implementation, $250,000 for Cornell's EMEP. Let's see, $4.7 million for climate resilient farms. So that includes a $200,000 increase over last year's levels, but also includes a $200,000 suballocation for Cornell's soil health program, $800,000 for the New York State Climate Adaptation program, including $200,000 for the Wood Product Development Council, which is actually a council that is chaired by our department, and you'll hear a little bit more about some of their work later when I talk about the climate efforts. $2.3 million for FLOPA, Finger Lakes Lake Ontario Protection Alliance. $18 million for the Oceans and Great Lakes Initiative, for which we do receive funding annually to administer programs across the state. And $11.5 million for soil and water conservation districts. So this represents the largest increase, one of the largest increase to the entire EPF. Of course, this is proposed, represents a $1 million proposed increase over last year's levels. So that is really, really good news. It certainly shows an ongoing commitment to conservation districts and all of the incredible work that's being done, and meeting both local, regional, and statewide priorities. So, of course, all of this is subject to legislative approval. Of course, that deadline is April 1st. So, hoping the state legislature sees fit to approve this budget and move forward with programs. Also, with that email that went out was the entire EPF list. I just talked about a few of the items on that EPF list today. So if you would like that email again, just let me know, and I can provide to you the entire proposed breakdown.
Great. Anything else on that, Brian?
Still, the department's budget pretty much keeps our fill levels where they are. So, we still very much at a hiring freeze. We all have through each of the divisions have put forward our needs, our longstanding needs for backfills that have, been in the works for some time, plus additional staffing needs. So more to come on that. We'll see how that all shakes out in the months to come, but I'll continue to report to the committee on department budgets and staffing.
Good. We want to move on to the Climate Action Council then.
Okay. Well, I guess that stays with me. I'm going to try. Not sure what that is about. You all can mute your lines.
Mine was muted.
Okay, not sure. it has gone away. So. Okay, at this point, you all should be seeing my screen.
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you. As I promised this committee, I would present on the status of the Climate Action Council and the Agriculture and Forestry Advisory Panel and the work that we have been doing and continue to do here to inform the state scoping plan, the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. So I've given some brief updates during other reports at the end of each meeting, but considering where we are in the status of this effort, I figured I would give a more thorough, comprehensive report to the committee at this point in time. This presentation is a modification of one that was given last week at our public engagement meeting, where we did receive comments from the public in real time, and verbal comments were provided to us on the status of our recommendations. And you know, that was a really helpful meeting to get a better handle on how the public are viewing our work. Public is viewing our work. So for that, I will jump right in. And you know, this is a lot less formal than that public hearing was last week. So please interrupt me, ask questions. Greg and Jennifer and Scott and others on the staff have been really key, instrumental on developing these recommendations with the panel as well. So Greg, Jennifer, if I'm missing anything, or if you want to jump in and interject, please feel free to do so. So this slide right here is just a broad overview of the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. I know we've covered this in the past, but this act was passed into law in July of 2019, and it sets very ambitious reductions in greenhouse gas emissions economy-wide. It includes a 40% decrease from 1990 levels by 2030. Just 9 years away. That's really not a lot of time. 85% decrease from 1990 levels by 2050. 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040, and establishes an overarching goal of carbon neutrality by 2050 as well. There are a number of panels that have been developed to inform the work of the Climate Action Council and inform the state scoping plan and how we're going to reach these ambitious targets. The agriculture and forestry sector or sectors are under one panel that is chaired by Commissioner Ball. So staff from Ag and Markets and staff from DEC are providing support to this effort. And the agriculture and forestry sector is kind of unique in that we encompass both emission reductions, primarily from agricultural operations, and also carbon sequestration. So it's really the only panel that is dealing right now with negative emissions as well as lowering emissions. All the panel recommendations are also being made with climate justice and just transitions at top of mind. So making sure that the investments that are being made are positively impacting environmental justice areas. And you know, as we transition our economy to a carbon neutral or carbon free economy, we want to make sure we're doing that in a way that doesn't cost the state jobs or the state you know, economy. So making sure that the transitions are just. So this is kind of a timeline of what's been done so far in our panel and what's left to be done. Certainly, our panel is not unique in this timeline, but our panel did convene in September of 2020. And due to COVID, that was a few months behind, which means that we have to get all of our work done a few months ahead of schedule, essentially, because of the way the law is written. Certain benchmarks have to be made by a certain matter of time. From when the law was passed. So we quickly got to work to develop a work plan, which would identify the various broad strategies that both agriculture and forestry would consider in reducing emissions and increasing sequestration. Around that same time, because of our work plan kind of identified these key topic areas, it was clear from the very broad mission of having both agriculture and forestry within our panel that we would have to break up into subgroups in order for us to really get in the weeds on the various types of recommendations. So we did that also in October. In November, we had to present a progress report to the Climate Action Council. Commissioner Ball presented that, a very thorough report on the status of our work plan and our recommendations up to that point. December, the subgroups continued to meet. We continued to work on recommendations and reporting out to the main panel on the status of those recommendations. We also started to engage with the Climate Justice Working Group. So as I said before, all of our panel's work also has to have climate justice in mind. So how is our work going to help positively impact disadvantaged communities, for example? January of 2021, recommendation development continues, and we continue to meet as subgroups. Here we are in February already. Really hard to believe. Last week, we had our 8th panel meeting, and also, as I mentioned before, we had a public engagement meeting where we received verbal comments from engaged citizens during that meeting. Basically, the rest of February, we're going to be working on the recommendations in what has been presented to us as an approved template. So we have a certain template that we have to put our recommendations in for the Climate Action Council later on this spring. So refinement on those and final recommendations are being worked up right now. And a number of subgroups are going to be meeting in February. Early March, I think it's March 2nd, we're going to be meeting again as a panel to refine those recommendations further and get consensus from the entire panel. In April, the actual recommendations are due to the Climate Action Council for their consideration. Beyond that, adaptation and resiliency recommendations will also be presented to the Climate Action Council. And any kind of feedback from the council will then go back to the panel leads and also be a part of what's called this integration analysis, where all of the panel's work and will be integrated into an analysis of what the overall impact is estimated to be. All this is in order to get the scoping plan draft out to the public by January 1st of 2022. Again, a date that is codified in the law. And early 2022, we'll also have public hearings on the draft plan. So it is a lot of work. It has been a lot of work. Will continue to be such for some time to come. Okay, for some reason I cannot advance my slides. Hold on while I try to work this out. All right, I think I'm good now. Sorry about that, everybody. So, as I mentioned before, we broke into subgroups. These are the subgroups that the panel is working through. So there's livestock dairy management, and we're looking at alternative manure management and precision feed management, both for methane reduction. Soil health and nutrient management, where we're looking at reducing nitrous oxide emissions through nutrient and fertilizer management, as well as increasing carbon sequestration through soil health practices. Agroforestry, which includes silvopasturing, alley cropping, repairing forest buffers. Land conversion, so keeping agriculture as agriculture, keeping forests as forests, and also improving access to agricultural lands and forest lands. Forestry and forest management broadly, looking at urban forestry, state afforestation, reforestation efforts, as well as improved forest management, and also increasing markets and the manufacture and use of harvested wood products. Finally, we also have what's called the bioeconomy subgroup, and that's really about advancing the production of sustainable and renewable bio-based products as a substitute for fossil fuel-based products, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So the agriculture and forestry considerations, livestock, dairy management. I'll go through each one of these, and obviously the agricultural piece we are, have been more involved in and leading that. So I might be a little bit more detailed here, but as I mentioned before, we're really looking at methane management or decreasing methane emissions from both manure management and enteric fermentation. All of these recommendations really do build on a solid track record of work that districts and Cornell University, Extension, NRCS have been doing for some time. So really we're striving to expand on current efforts and programs while also seeking new opportunities through continued basic and applied research and private-public partnerships, really looking to expand incentive and financing options for farms to implement systems that will continue to reduce and sequester greenhouse gas emissions. So, manure management, really broadly, looking at reducing the methane emissions by implementing cover and flare systems, anaerobic digesters, and other systems that abate, collect, and capture and mitigate methane from manure storages. So we're looking at increasing the focus for methane reduction through the state's climate resilient farming program. Also looking at increasing focus on other state programs. Certainly NYSERDA has done a lot of work in this space in the past, while also seeking pathways for additional private sector financing of on-farm systems when it makes sense to do so and the economics are there. Feed management to reduce enteric fermentation. So this is really about feed digestion. We have, there's a lot of good data out there and research that has been done on precision feed management for reducing nutrients, for example. Same type of system can also reduce methane emissions. So really increasing the feed efficiency of our livestock, conducting and reviewing research on novel approaches as well. And there's been a lot of discussion about feed additives in the media for reducing enteric fermentation. A lot of that is just discussion at this point. Not a lot of research necessarily has been done, but we'd like to keep an eye on that for additional reductions. Certainly as well, advancing information, training, outreach, and technical assistance to livestock producers at various scales. Here we're looking at seeking opportunities for incentives to farms with long track records of precision feed management, as well as seeking new incentives and ways to encourage farmers to adopt this in the early stages. And we've talked a lot, like I said before, that we have a good track record. We've had the CRF Track 1 for methane management. So really we are looking at focusing on projects that are ready for implementation now, while also engaging in research on innovative approaches to manure management and supporting implementation of emerging technologies in the long term. So there's some manure management technologies that have been discussed before, that may, be able to bring down the methane emissions even further. Okay, agroforestry. So what is agroforestry? Incorporating trees into areas of agricultural production. This certainly has the potential to reliably increase carbon sequestration and have numerous other environmental benefits. Initially, this was going to be discussed more in the forestry and forest management subgroup, but we have some really good experts on our panel that talked about the distinctions in planting trees in agricultural production areas versus non-production areas. So we decided to break this out into a separate subgroup. So we're looking at forested buffers. So we all know what those are, so I don't have to go through that. But increasing the implementation and establishment of buffers through existing programs. So the Ag Non-Point Source Program for Water Quality has funded numerous acres of buffers over the years. The Climate Resilient Farming Program has also started to do that, certainly as we're looking at water management issues. And of course, we have the Source Water Buffer Program. So looking to really increase the adoption of forested buffers through these recommendations. In looking at doing so while increasing, our existing incentives, but also exploring new incentive structures for increasing income for maintaining these systems for the long term. And these could be conservation easements, other types of ecosystem payments, or potentially higher rental payments. Silvopasturing. Silvopasturing, the practice of integrating trees, forests, and the grazing of domesticated animals in a mutually beneficial way. We did receive some really good presentations from experts from Cornell Cooperative Extension on this. We have also received some proposals for silvopasturing through the CRF program in recent years. So it's not that well known or that well implemented in the state thus far, but what we're learning that it really is about intensively managed rotational grazing systems. So building on the momentum of farmers that are implementing these types of systems and using that as a bit of a gateway to encourage the planting of trees within those systems, or grazing in forest land where the management might actually increase sequestration at that point where it could be a degraded forest and certainly experiencing a lot of invasive type species. And by grazing in those forests, we actually can improve the conditions. And to that end, the site and species selection are huge considerations. And, this does need increased education and technical assistance. Finally, alley cropping, which is carbon sequestration gained by planting wide rows of trees with companion crops in the alleyways between those rows. Again, this is relatively unknown practice in New York State, so certainly requires further education, outreach, technical assistance, field trials, market analysis for this to take off. But like I said before, when we are planting trees in agricultural production areas, that certainly has an ability for us to reliably increase our sequestration in above ground biomass. Okay, nutrient management, as I said before, nutrient management is certainly not new to this group, but the same, good nutrient management that reduces the amount of nutrients into our waterways can also reduce nitrous oxide emissions. So continuing to focus on the 4 R's of nutrient management, continuing to focus on fertilizer management while not sacrificing crop yields. And this is applicable to all of our crop fields, hay fields, pastures, orchards, vineyards, any lands receiving nutrients. So really increasing and amplifying what we're currently doing. So increased cost share support for technical assistance and planning for nutrient management, but also soil health practices, taking a systems approach. And really also increasing our ability to implement those plans and through the state's AEM programs such as CRF. Looking at also expanding cost share eligibility and AIM programs for equipment needed by farms to implement more advanced soil health and nutrient management systems. So moving on to soil health. Here we are obviously talking about increasing carbon sequestration with good soil health practices. A few of those practices that we have been focusing on already: cover crops or double crops, conservation tillage, as well as managed grazing. And really here we are focusing on increasing current efforts, but also exploring innovative incentives to increase adoption. And adoption here is underlined. I think we all know why in this setting, but it's not just about implementing these systems, but also helping farmers to adopt them in the long run so that it becomes a part of their management moving forward. So of course, increased technical assistance and outreach, putting out a flexible soil health program that encourages the stacking of practices or a comprehensive system for those practices. We're looking at that payment for ecosystem services. So that's really another way to provide an incentive to farmers that is more outcome-based rather than just practice-based. So, can there be a suite of different practices developed on a farm, implemented on a farm that can be measured and quantified to provide an ecosystem service? In this case, we're looking at carbon sequestration primarily. Certainly support for equipment. The CRF program does fund equipment as well as ag non-point source, but continuing that support for equipment, especially with smaller or more diverse types of farms. Measurement and quantification is extremely important here. We know the soil health has numerous environmental benefits, but the benefit that we're really after here is increasing carbon sequestration or organic matter in soils. That can be very hard to measure and quantify, and certainly it can take years to build up that organic matter and not a very long time for it to literally evaporate into the atmosphere with different types of management. So looking at ways that we can measure and quantify the benefits so that we can increase our incentives for further adoption. There is some really interesting work being done in perennial agriculture. So perhaps perennial grains can be something that farmers would be apt to plant in this long run. But also in the short term, we have some experience in getting cows out in intensively managed pastures. We have been doing that for water quality for quite some time where it's applicable. So continuing to promote that as well. Of course, we also have come to realize, and districts have been reporting this in their CRF proposals and final reports, while we're focusing on those conservation systems, we're also reducing fossil fuel and electricity use on farms. So we want to capitalize on that. We want to continue to count that towards the entire emissions picture on farms. So, if they're able to take one pass over that field as opposed to 4, and they can quantify that reduction, those are things that we also very much want to capture, as well as on-farm renewable energy systems or beneficial electrification. Those types of emissions aren't generally counted as an agricultural emission, but really to give the farm a total picture of their greenhouse gas footprint. It's very important to consider these items. So these would be considered some initiatives that could support the strategies. A few of them I already talked about. Of course, increasing technical assistance, expanding our capacity to aid in the planning, implementation, and operation of these practices. Districts and the conservation partnership are already doing so much out there, but much, much more needs to be done. So we have to recognize it takes people. So we need to expand those services. AIM planning for climate change mitigation adaptation. This is a concept that isn't necessarily new, but one that the panel has thrown a lot of support behind, and one that we really need to be looking at so we can provide the farm with that carbon footprint that I talked about earlier. Through the AEM planning process, we can also prescribe a number of practices that will reduce the footprint further. And like all of our AIM planning, it can be done progressively at the management level or comprehensively at the whole farm level. So stay tuned for that, and that will certainly be something that we'll be relying on this committee and the conservation partnership to help us work through. Research and outreach, expand research and outreach to guide current efforts, but also, as we talked about, we really do need emerging practices to get to the highest level of impact. And this is 2030 is 9 years away. That's our first benchmark year. That's not a lot of time. So concentrating on those practice systems that we know work makes sense, but also engaging in ongoing research so we can expand our practices and our tools to experience even deeper cuts by that 2050 deadline, and certainly beyond that as well. As I already talked about, payments for ecosystem services, something that our panel is considering as well. So it's a different type of incentive structure, something that we had talked about in the early stages of CRF, and we're excited to get in the weeds with this committee as we move forward with those concepts. It's something that has support. I'm going to pause there because those were agricultural emission reduction sequestration targets. I lost my agenda, so I know there it is. No idea how I'm doing on time, but I think I'm doing all right. So are there any questions, comments?
Brian, who's doing the research on the perennial grains?
Well, so I do know that that's been a part of the soil health project in Cornell, and I'm certainly other land grant institutions are doing that as well. Greg, Jennifer, I know you guys have probably looked into that. Do you have anything to add?
Matt Ryan at Cornell is the point person on that among others.
The one that comes to mind, and I have no idea what it really, the attributes of it, but there's it's been talked about. Dave Wolf has talked about Kernza is potentially one. I'm not really, don't know much beyond that, but.
Okay, I was curious. If we get further information, maybe pass it along sometime.
Absolutely. In fact, we've talked to the Cornell Soil Health PIs, and I've talked to Brian as well to organize a more thorough report on their efforts for this committee. So stay tuned for that. Okay, so the next set of recommendations really have to do more primarily with forestry and forest management, but certainly there are a lot of overlaps with the work that we're doing. I should also say too, as I mentioned before, all of our recommendations are being made with equity considerations and climate justice in mind. So, you know, this is an area that our panel is currently working on. We do recognize that increasing planning, technical services, financial assistance does improve access to programs and effective practices for farmers, especially those that have been traditionally underserved. So, you know, more work will be done on how we can, you know, better address equity considerations moving forward with these programs and these concepts. Okay, so forest and forestry management, there's actually a subgroup meeting about to start on this. So the DEC's Division of Lands and Forests really are heading this subgroup and these strategy topics. But overall, keeping forests is forest, so trying to avoid conversion. New York State has 18.6 million acres of forest land. That's a slight decrease since 2000. I think in the state, the research shows that all of the forest land taken together, there's an estimated amount of between 25 and 30 million metric tons of sequestration capacity right now. But in order for that net neutrality goal to be realized by 2050, we essentially have to double that. So we have to figure out a way that we can really maximize our sequestration capacity. And that starts with keeping forests as forests so that they can continue to sequester carbon and also all the other environmental benefits that go along with that. And certainly beyond the forest management and the avoided conversion, plant more trees. So it seems pretty simple. This is really a overview slide, but get more trees planted in both rural and urban landscapes.
Is there any research or anything about just increasing capacity with through forest management by, like, whether it's getting rid of more old growth trees and allowing more young growth, stuff like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've heard some presentations by experts in that regard. I think that number is a little bit harder to come by, like the increased sequestration from well-managed forests than, you know, obviously from no forest to new forest. But there's still ongoing research that will inform, you know, just how we count that, how we count the amount more sequestration can happen from a well-managed forest to a forest that's managed for carbon, maximum carbon uptake, but also just managed in general for a whole host of landowner objectives. That's a really good question, Darren, because that's really, you know, the key to all of this. If the state is already approximately 60% forested, you know, we just don't have the land mass to double our sequestration capacity. So we also have to rely heavily on much more forest management that will need to be done by private forest owners.
Yeah. Well,
and
I guess just what pops into my head was the millions of acres of Adirondack land that's not allowed to be logged. And I'm just wondering if that was if that was managed better, if that would help us meet these goals.
Definitely discussions that are happening with the panel.
Okay. Okay.
You know, and in addition to you know, harvest, the control of invasive species, certainly deer browse is a major concern in the state with regeneration and any afforestation efforts. So looking at ways that we can provide incentives and more education and, you know, technical assistance to private forest landowners for, you know, the creation of new forests or the management of existing forests. Encouraging sound forestry. So we talk about, you know, high grading, which is really cutting of only the best trees, results in less forest carbon compared to scientifically sound forestry practices. So ways that, you know, the forest management plans can be developed to still achieve objectives of the landowner and harvest, but do it in a way that's more environmentally sound towards sequestration. So the panel is discussing ways to scale up improved forest management, focusing again on private forests. Most of the forest land is privately owned. There's the 480A tax program, so there's some discussion right now about developing a carbon option or track for a 480C incentive. So that allows both harvest and no harvest scenarios, but would be done with sequestration as the main management consideration. We have been talking a lot about the parallels to the AEM program. So there really is no parallel right now on the forestry piece. So really opening up opportunities that landowners can seek planning resources similar to AEM for forestry management, and certainly forest carbon being a component of that. So that's actually one of the most exciting discussions that we're having right now is how we can help in the forestry sector as well to expand planning on private forest lands, and conservation districts certainly are expanding their forestry chops and capacity. You look at the Water Quality Symposium agenda for this year, and it's heavily, it's heavy amount of forest management in there. So certainly that's an area of increasing capacity, increasing interest to conservation districts as well. So certification for foresters is another initiative here to make sure that forest management planning is being done by credentialed foresters, and that we can, separate good forest planning from maybe not as good forest planning. The reforestation, afforestation area, again, this is another overlap to our work. As we heard from Cornell University earlier, or actually I should say last year now, in regards to the amount of underutilized agricultural lands that could be reforested or afforested. Right now, there's an estimated maximum of 1.7 to 2.4 million acres of private lands that could be reforested. So developing incentives for establishing those forests and underutilized or marginal agricultural lands and other rural lands is something that the panel is looking at. Of course, with all the other considerations in mind in regards to the impacts forest generation. Increasing tree canopies in cities and villages. Also, the research out there is indicating that the amount of sequestration capacity for trees in urban settings and suburban settings could even be more than forest settings. So really capitalizing on that and making sure that not only do we engage in planting efforts, but also maintenance efforts and all the other types of management that goes along with that. And now I do know that I am running behind, so I'm going to kind of move through this a little bit quicker. The harvested wood products issue. This is a discussion that is happening both in the forestry and forest management as well as the bioeconomy subgroups. And we do have representation on our panel from the Wood Products Development Council. So certainly as we can increase the market for harvested wood products, that will help to ensure better management of our forests, but also those harvested wood products can be substitution for carbon intensive material. And when you cut down a tree and you put that into a building, a mass timber or whatever it might be, not to mention with all the types of wood that would be used for trim, cabinets, and other types of building materials, that continues to sequester when it's long-term managed as a part of the building envelope. So that's something that we're looking at. Avoided conversions, as I talked about, keeping forests as forests, but also keeping agriculture as agricultural land, as it has a much less of an impact carbon footprint, and also reduces vehicle miles traveled. So, really looking at incentives, increasing incentives to conserve forests, but also looking at expanding our conservation easement programs for agricultural lands, and also the land acquisition programs that are currently ongoing right now with DEC, the ways that that program can be utilized to keep forests as forests. The bioeconomy, again, this is a portion of the economy that really produces sustainable, renewable, bio-based feedstocks rather than fossil fuel-based feedstocks. And this is important for a couple of reasons because of that substitution, but also because it opens up markets for harvested wood products and markets potentially for bioenergy types of feedstocks and materials. So this subgroup is being headed by the Director of the Office of Climate Change, who is part of our panel as well. And they've had multiple meetings right now and heard from numerous experts on the capacity of the bioeconomy, where it exists today and where it could be in the future here in New York State. So, you know, here we're talking about focusing on the long-term bioeconomy supply chain that can serve multiple future markets, assessing the potential policies that achieve the CLCPA requirements as a foundation for building out this market sector, starting with an assessment of existing policies and programs, like I said, and, you know, figuring out a roadmap for where we could go in the future. Consulting with the environmental justice groups throughout to make sure that equity considerations and support of disadvantaged communities are being, you know, top of mind and considered here. Really also enhancing the public's understanding of the bioeconomy. I thought I knew a lot about these issues before we started this effort, but I've learned quite a bit more. You know, certainly as it relates to this type of strategy. Three main categories of focus here are substitution, bioenergy, and biorefining. And it seems if I wait too long on a slide, it freezes up on me again here. So bear with me. I don't know why that's happening. All right, so I almost done here. So I think I covered most of this as well. So on the bioeconomy, so you know, we're going to be developing a set of recommendations based on these main considerations: substitution of bio-based products, bioenergy, and biorefining. And really, it's also about preserving and enhancing the New York State supply chain to meet future market opportunities. So our next panel meeting date's March 2nd, and that is the panel meeting where we'll be going through the status of all the individual subgroup recommendations and trying to develop consensus. Then we'll have one final meeting before the panel recommendations are due to the Climate Action Council, and that will be on March 16th. So both will be 1 p.m. start, and all of these panel meetings are open to the public to listen only, unless it's a special public engagement meeting. But we've had a really good turnout over the months. And then when we heard from the public last week, we definitely understand that folks are paying attention to this work. So all the meeting materials and the meeting announcements get posted to the Climate Action Council, climate.ny.gov. So, you know, that'll be part of the minutes as well here to just encourage everybody to listen to those meetings if you have the time and interest to do so. There's also a dedicated email address here, agriculture.forestry@agriculture.ny.gov, where members of the public are submitting comments, and all those comments are being collected and considered as we finalize our work. And Dale, that is all that I have, unless there are questions. More questions.
Anyone? If not, thanks, Brian. Informative on which way the council's going. That's pretty good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Next is Ag Non-Point Source, Jason and Bethany.
Okay, let me pull up our dashboard. Okay, Jason, you can take it away here.
Okay, thank you. So program status update for Ag Non-Point Source for the month. There have been 823 completed contracts totaling 131 million. That was an increase of 10 contracts since our last meeting in December and 1.9 million. We have 166 active contracts in the database totaling 59.4 million. That was a decrease of 10 contracts. All of them closed out. and 3.9 million decrease in the total amount. And there is one contract still in the status of partial closeout. 35 contracts have been canceled in the history of the program, and there are 0 contracts currently pending.
Thank you, Jason. And I just wanted to, I guess, give the group an update kind of on our accomplishments, or I guess some statistics on, you know, what was done in 2020 in terms of, you know, contract management. So last year in 2020, we were able to complete a total of 58 contract closeouts, which is a lot. That's probably the most contracts that we've closed out in 1 year since I've been in my position. We also received a total of 47 contract amendments, 44 of those being time extensions. 2 were formal budget amendments, and we had 1 landowner change. And as Jason said, right now we don't have any pending contracts. And unfortunately, in 2020, we were unable to make any awards on new projects. Are there any questions on the Ag Non-Point Source program?
Hi, this is Corey, Montgomery County.
Hi, Corey.
Hey, good morning, everybody. At our managers meeting, Brian was on there, and I did ask if there was any opportunity to release the round 26 list, even if there's a writing on there that says this isn't an official ranked list and whatever, just so that districts out here, so we can plan for our round 27, so we can kind of know where we are in round 26. And, you know, we're working with our equip partners within our CS on our contracts too. And, you know, I can make modifications and have everything ready to go for the next round if I know where our applications rank. So I just wonder if there's any opportunities to get that list out there, regardless of the funding opportunity, and just let us kind of see where we landed and what we have to do for our planning for 2021.
Thanks, Corey. I think, Bethany, I can take that. We'll inquire to see what we can release, you know, for planning purposes. And we do anticipate, you know, this, as we continue with state committee meetings through the winter months, then we'll have a better timeline, I think, on, you know, our programs moving forward. But that is something that we can check on. And thank you, Corey, as well for, you know, the reminder that you had talked about that at the managers meeting.
Yep. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Jason and Bethany?
There was a question that was just entered into the chat, I think from Beth Claypool, regarding the round 26 and round 27. Our intent, if we get the proper approvals and the go-aheads, would be to award the round 26 projects first before releasing another round of funding.
Good. Any other questions, anyone? Thank you, Jason and Bethany. We will move on to the Climate Resilient Farming Program. Jason?
Sure. So, on the Climate Resilient Farming program status for the database, still no update in the database formally, but as a review, we have 14 completed contracts totaling 1.4 million, 56 active contracts totaling 5.9 million. 3 contracts have been canceled so far, 0 in partial closeout, or 0 are pending currently.
Any questions on that, anyone? Jennifer, do you have anything you wanted to bring in?
Yeah, thank you, Dale. Thanks, Jason, for that update. I'll just add that CRF, we've had a lot of closeouts coming in as well. There are a handful under review. Our round one is getting close to being fully completed, so that'll be exciting when we have a full round come to a full closeout. And yeah, no, we don't have any amendments this month, so that's about all I have for CRF, unless there are any questions.
I think I can just say thank you, Jennifer and Jason. I can also maybe answer Beth's question here that she hasn't asked, but the same is true for CRF, that our intention here is to fund round 5 before we release any new RFPs as well. So more to come on all of that, but that would be our plan.
Thanks, Brian. Anyone, comments, questions for Jason and Jennifer? Thank you. We will move on to TAC update.
Okay, so I will kind of kick things off here. We had a technical advisory committee meeting a few weeks ago on January 20th, and it was a very well attended meeting. We had a pretty full agenda and talked about several different topics throughout the course of the meeting. And as you can see here, I've listed the various topics that we discussed. We covered a conservation practice standard update, as well as discussed some items regarding our next rounds of funding for CRF and Ag Non-Point Source. And we continued our discussion on the cover crop survey and kind of dived a little bit deeper into the qualitative responses that we received as part of that survey. So I guess to kind of give you guys a better idea of what we talked about with each of these topics, I'll kind of hand the mic off to various different staff members who kind of covered those topics at the TAC meeting.
Okay, yeah, so this is Tim. This is Tim Clark, the state engineer for the committee. And just an update on the conservation practice standards. We had asked the State Board for Engineering, Land Surveying, and Geology to just kind of give us a timeline, what it would take to get their opinion on 3 practices. They didn't do that. They just went ahead and reviewed those 3 practices on their own, and then got back to me. I had a chat with them, and they are interested in kind of carving out conservation scenarios for those 3 practices, and they asked for a little bit more information about them, more information about soil and water technicians and what kind of experiences they have, and kind of to lay out a framework for what would be conservation practices and what would be engineering scenarios within each practice. So I'm working on preparing that information, and I hope to get back to them next week with that. Hopefully we'll be able to set up a meeting between me and their subcommittee that has worked on this and get things straightened out. So yeah, I hope to have that kind of wrapped up this spring at least, so we can have a more definition on those 3 standards on livestock pipelines, stream cross, and trails and walkways. Okay, that's all I have. Any questions on that before we kick it over to Jen?
Sorry.
Yeah, okay, go for it, Jen.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, so at the TAC meeting, we did discuss some alternative manure management systems, just to explore different opportunities that could be offered under CRF. Currently, track 1 is exclusive to cover and flare systems. Some discussions under the CLCPA some discussions under the CLCPA have talked about prevention of methane related to manure management, and are there alternative ways to abate methane? So that was just a discussion around that topic, and just to explore some potential ideas under CRF. So more to come under that. That was just an exploratory discussion.
Okay, so we also talked a little bit about round 27 through the Ag Non-Point Source program. And although we don't have a timeline for the release of the round 27 RFP, we have begun planning for that and developing that next round of funding. So at our meeting back in January, we discussed the round 27 bonus points and discussed the various bonus points and the bonus categories that we offer through the Ag Non-Point Source program. In round 26 and even before that, our bonus points, the total amount of bonus points that are available, 4 points, which represented 10% of the maximum points available per proposal, which was 40 points. In round 26, we made the decision to increase the amount, the maximum points available per proposal to 50 points. So in order to maintain that 10%, for bonus points, we discussed increasing the amount of points, bonus points available to 5. And
we talked a bit about the length of cover crop contracts and the flexibility that they may have in the timing, whether it be 1 year for a trial or 5 years or however long to see the benefits of cover crops take effect. We discussed the pros and cons of this, and of course of the middle ground that we have of our 3 years, which is trying to get the best of both worlds of those, to give them enough time to see and be within those years. The interesting case studies to find out why, equipment cost share worked in those and what we could do in similar programs. We also talked about supporting custom operators. They are stretched for time at the time of the year when cover crops are going in, and they're very important for getting the large scale amount of cover crops into the ground. So we discussed ways to support them and to get perhaps more funding to hiring them. We had suggestions for the New York Soil Health Initiative. We're obviously going to share those, and they're very good suggestions considering budget and logistics should they allow. We talked a bit about the length of cover crop contracts and the flexibility that they may have in the timing, whether it be 1 year for a trial or 5 years or however long to see the benefits of cover crops take effect. We discussed the pros and cons of this, and of course of the middle ground that we have of our 3 years, which is trying to get the best of both worlds of those, to give them enough time to see and be within those years. We noticed that a lot of those working with districts continue to keep using cover crops, and so that does show a high level of adoption, perhaps, but also of just good cooperation between districts and already existing partnering farms. So a big way to get more cover crops. We noticed that a lot of those working with districts continue to keep using cover crops, and so that does show a high level of adoption, perhaps, but also of just good cooperation between districts and already existing partnering farms. So a big way to get more cover crops in the ground would just be to get more farms working with districts generally, because it'll catch on, and to be part of that community or part of that group in the ground would just be to get more farms working with districts generally, because it'll catch on, and to be part of that community or part of that group, it will follow. And then we talked about our statewide internal data, talked about, national amounts of cover crops there were, New York State's amount of cover crop based on the National Agricultural Statistics, and just gauged ourselves and how successful we are and where we have to go. And next steps, it will follow. And then we talked about our statewide internal data, talked about, national amounts of cover crops there were, New York State's amount of cover crop, based on the National Agricultural Statistics, and just gauged ourselves and how successful we are and where we have to go. And next steps for the cover crop project in general, we wanted to unpack a little bit more with maybe 6 to 10 districts who do for the cover crop project in general. We wanted to unpack a little bit more with maybe 6 to 10 districts who do a lot of cover crops, who have a lot of experience, to unpack these questions in real time in sort of a round table setting. So soon we'd like to reach out to districts who who would be willing to speak with us, and just pick their brains further, because nothing really stimulates mental activity like personal engagement. Do a lot of cover crops, who have a lot of experience, to unpack these questions in real time in sort of a round table setting. So soon we'd like to reach out to districts who who would be willing to speak with us, and just pick their brains further, because nothing really stimulates mental activity like personal engagement as best we can. So that is going to be a fun next step, and of course we are continuing to write up everything as best we can. So that is going to be a fun next step, and of course we are continuing to write up everything as we go, just to have record and a good technical report to work from going forward. So that's it. Thank you.
Anything else? Go ahead.
I was just going to say that
everything as we go, just to have record and a good technical report to work from going forward. So that's it. Thank you.
Anything else? Go ahead.
I was just going to say that wrapped up our meeting in January, and we'll bring you another update in April. Wrapped up our meeting in January, and we'll bring you another update in April.
Anyone have any questions, comments for staff? Interesting. It's especially with the cover crops, and to find out why certain districts are doing much better than others. I'd be interested in hearing that. And how do we get the farmers that aren't doing? Anyone have any questions, comments for staff? Interesting. It's especially with the cover crops, and to find out why certain districts are doing much better than others. I'd be interested in hearing that. And how do we get the farmers that aren't doing it to start, and why they're not doing it? I'd like to know that. To start, and why they're not doing it. I'd like to know that. Thank you. I just got a message from Brian that Claus Martin is on. If you can hear me, Claus, I know you've done phenomenal work on cover crops. If you have any comments, we'd be very interested in. Thank you. I just got a message from Brian that Claus Martin is on. If you can hear me, Claus, I know you've done phenomenal work on cover crops. If you have any comments, we'd be very interested in hearing them.
Okay, yes. I was just typing one, but I can give it verbally if you want me to.
Please do. Hearing them.
Okay, yes. I was just typing one, but I can give it verbally if you want me to.
Please do.
I think cover crops as a term has caused us a problem, because the soil doesn't care whether you planted something as a crop or as a cover crop. And what has really kickstarted the adoption of cover crops in our neighborhood is that farmers are discovering that they become really excellent livestock feed, and that they, I think cover crops as a term has caused us a problem because the soil doesn't care whether you planted something as a crop or as a cover crop. And what has really kickstarted the adoption of cover crops in our neighborhood is that farmers are discovering that they become really excellent livestock feed and that they add to their total income per acre. And I think finding ways that we can make these cover crops add to their total income per acre. And I think finding ways that we can make these cover crops add income to a farm could really push us ahead and accelerate adoption, because at that point you don't need to cost share, you don't need to throw money at it. The farmers are just changing wholesale in this area because it's adding to their total production and adding to their profits. And at the same time, protecting the soil and protecting the water. And I think what we need to do is that's the low-hanging fruit, is these ways that we can use cover crops to actually act as a double crop and increase the farm's income.
I agree on that 100% because we do it on our farm. And the double cropping is a phenomenal way to make additional income and improve the soil health. I really think we need to have if we can't do a meeting in face, to do a webinar type thing where we explain to farmers through Extension and others that the benefits of just that by working with farmers like you to show it. I think it would be a huge benefit in the long run to get more farmers to adapt it.
I'd throw in one other idea, and that's we're finding that no-till helps the winter survival of our winter crops. And this is not exactly cover crops, but it's in the same line, that when we have a stiff stubble in the field, it protects from wind, it protects from the winter sun, it reduces desiccation, it catches snow. And we're finding, for instance, that Austrian winter peas survive perfectly here when they're no-tilled or when they're mixed with another species. And that's another way that we can increase adoption. But the Austrian winter peas, you really add protein and add value to the cover crops when they're used as forages.
Has this Cornell Soil Health Program contacted you at all to discuss options like that, Claus?
I've worked with them. We're running a little ahead of the science on our farm with this, but this is definitely feeding in, and I've been really excited with the results we're seeing of having the stubble in the fields, just for how much good it's doing to the crop. And that's another case of if a farmer sees that they're getting a benefit from it, you don't have to incentivize them very much because everyone sees the neighbor doing better than they are, and they're all going to be doing it shortly.
Yeah, that's my belief too. Well, we need to, and I think, I'm not sure how to proceed with it, but I think we need to utilize knowledge out there from farmers like Claus who are leading in this in a much greater way than we have been. And Brian, I'm not sure exactly how we want to do that, but I think it could benefit our whole goal in the long run of getting a lot more cover crops in.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Klaus. This is Brian Steinmiller. Thank you for those comments. I really appreciate them. And I've taken a lot of notes. And Dale, really great suggestion about getting a more concerted effort out there of education awareness. And let's use this platform if we have it right now, like a WebEx type platform, to have a focused, meeting focused workshop on these issues. I really think that's a great idea.
Excellent.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, because we've been kind of thinking about this at AFT as well, and have had some workshops and kind of thinking about peer-to-peer farmer connections just in the Genesee River watershed. But because of the online platform, there's been a lot more content to generate that could be, a part of me like that, or could kind of add to the mix as well. So welcome to either myself or someone else from the team be part of those discussions too.
Good. I think probably need to not sure reach out or who we need to talk to at Cornell or what to see if we can help develop this type of thing where it can be webinared out to farmers on why what causes developed, and maybe some others could be beneficial in a much larger scale, even for crop farmers who have animal farms next door could utilize it.
At the risk of talking too much, I see a nutrient management opportunity here too, where if a crop farm works with an animal farm, there's a real point in trading manure. So that if we're taking forage off the crop farm, part of the deal should be for the mineral cycle to be closed and have a compensatory amount of manure going back onto the crop farm.
I agree. We work just with that, in that exact same thing with the next door neighbor. He grows peas, and then we would leave it fallow afterwards, but we go in and put manure on and grow sorghum.
Yes.
And phenomenal. And then his comment is the next year he has no weeds to spray.
That's exactly right. Yep.
It's just a phenomenal thing, and huge way for us to utilize manure 100 feet from our barns, plus get a great extra crop of tonnage at a low price, and helps him and us.
Yes. One other concept that we've observed here is that there are plants, the C4 plants are much more water efficient in the summer, but over winter, some of the C3 plants will grow as soon as the temperature goes much above 33, 34 degrees. And crops like ryegrass are putting tonnage on in March and April, and they're utilizing nutrients and producing feed that otherwise that land would just be laying there doing nothing.
Or blowing away brown in the wind.
Yes, that's right.
Excellent. A lot to think about, a lot to figure out if we can help move it forward across the state. I think it's all of us working together. Okay. I guess go ahead. Do we have anything else on that anybody wants to discuss? Okay. If not, I guess we'll just move on to voting staff advisory, public and conservation district reports, comments. I'll start and I'll go through voting members. I don't have anything to say today. Erica?
Sure. Kind of along the theme of what we were just discussing, AFT just released a national report called Combating Climate Change on U.S. Cropland, and I'll drop both the link to the report, and then we have a much more digestible 2-page fact sheet. But really, it's looking at no-till and cover crops as soil health management practices that, in response to some of the kind of popular press around whether or not agriculture can really have a role in combating climate change and to be part of that solution. So this is put together to look at a national scale, but do something that is certainly relevant to conversations that the committee has and that some of the work here. So just wanted to share that just kind of popped out this week. I'm not even sure we've spread the news more widely, but I'll make sure you all have the link to that information. And again, it's really looking at cover crops and no-till as solutions as part of climate mitigation. And that's all.
Thank you. Karen?
I don't really think I have too much. We're going to have our annual lobby days here in a couple of weeks. Meeting all done virtual, obviously. And then at the state level, we're going through a strategic planning review. We've been going through that for a couple months, and we'll be continuing that for the next few months. I think that's about it.
Great, thank you. Dave? Anything to report, Dave? I think he's got to get his thing on mute, I think.
Yeah. Oh, there he goes.
Hey,
There you
I
are.
don't have anything to yell out. Except get rid of the snow slowly.
Okay. Brian, move on to you.
Sure. Thank you. Great discussion. I really appreciate it. We will start with advisory member reports. I'll just go through the same order as I did for roll call. Ag and Markets, Tim, do you have anything?
No, Brian, nothing to report.
Okay. Chaz, CDEA.
Hey everybody, I hope all is well. This is the last week to sign up for Water Quality Symposium. We already have 200 people signed up. Classes are filling up quickly. We've met the caps on a couple of them. So if you haven't done so and you want to, make sure everybody signs up for that. We are doing our annual meeting on March, the Tuesday, I think it's the 8th, at 2 o'clock on Zoom, which will also include our awards ceremony following. So we are looking forward to that. I'll be sending out notices soon for invites for that. All are welcome though. We're doing most of Water Quality Symposium via Zoom, so that we hope will go well. We are taping a majority of the classes that we are able to. Some we are not able to, and some cost extra to do it. So make sure you get in there. Our 4-hour class online is doing very well, but we are actually looking into possibly shifting some of the platforms to make it slightly easier to utilize and do. We are, sorry, Brian, taping, not recording, not taping. Sorry, I date myself a little bit there.
I had to.
It's our ongoing joke just to entertain everyone. And, you know, another thing at Water Quality Symposium is we have elections of officers. So this may be one of my last soil and water and committees that I'll be on, unless Dustin needs somebody else other than Caitlin, who's going to be running for VP in Hamilton County. So I really do think that this is excellent that we are doing these via Zoom, because so many people can attend. At one point, I think I saw a cap of like 61 people on the call, which is fantastic. So I think that this is a way to get more information out to more districts, so they can see what's going on directly, and actually add some information in. Brian and I did ask at the last managers meeting, like Corey said, you know, what can Soil and Water Committee do for districts? And you know, we had a little bit of a conversation about continuing to support, continuing to ask what we need and what we want, and continuing to look for recommendations from us and what we're seeing in the field. And that is even more evident now than it was a couple years ago, especially with everything that's going on now. I also asked the same question at the NYACD meeting, and told them if they had any comments or concerns to make sure they got them to Dale and Brian. So I think that this works really good. So thank you. I'm not going to take up any more of your time unless you have any questions.
Well, thank you, Chaz. And I just have to say it has been an absolute pleasure working with you as the president of the CDA. And I really do look forward to working with Dustin and working with all the new officers as well, and Caitlin. And just thank you again for all of your support, and really look forward to continuing to work with you as district manager of Franklin County. as you continue to manage and direct and lead the staff up there. So we know where to find you.
We also always need that connection to our sister country north of us in Canada. So
that's right. That's right. Well, and you know, if I ever miss any of your insight and wisdom, I'll just go back and listen to these tapes.
Excellent. Yes, great. Thank you. Smart Alex.
I wanted to also thank you, Chaz. I forgot to unmute a minute ago, but I really do appreciate your input and all your help. Been a great benefit for our committee.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Let me find my list. DEC, who would like to go first?
Hey, Brian, this is Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
I think I just want to mention that we are starting up the CAFO work group again. It's been a couple years since we've all gotten together and some members have changed. So I just thought it would be useful to say that we finally set a date. It looks like March 4th is going to be our kickoff meeting. And it's basically a work group that pulls together a couple representatives from like each of the stakeholder groups that might have an interest in the CAFO permit. And then it gives them an opportunity to kind of tell us what works, what doesn't work, concerns they have, or suggestions for the next round of permits. So that's happening March 4th, like I said. And you guys, I think Tim Wimmer is the representative for the Soil and Water Conservation Districts.
Great.
And Greg Albrecht will obviously be on there too. So if anybody has any suggestions or concerns they want to communicate to the work group, reach out to them and let them know.
Wonderful, Sarah. Thank you.
Yep.
Julie, do you have anything for us?
I've been working on the non-point source report with the SEAM, so hopefully we'll be done with that soon. And I'm just finishing up the Lake Champlain Watershed implementation plan. So we're hoping to have that out for public comment in the next few months.
That sounds great. Thank you. And if there's anything that we need to supply to you information-wise, just make sure you let us know. We get it to you as soon as we can.
Yeah, thank you so much. You've already given me a ton of stuff, so I appreciate it.
Here. All right. Good stuff. Thank you, Julie. Asim.
Yeah, other than non-point source update, I do not have anything else. I just got a approval for a non-point source success story, but it's not related with the ag and market. It's mostly a dam that we have removed in Rome. So we may be putting that story in the NPS success stories. Other than that, I do not have any things to add.
Thank you, Asim. Just for clarification, that's EPA success stories?
Yes, EPA non-point source success story, basically. So we promise EPA roughly one story per year, basically. And we found out removing the non-point source grant in the particular basin is very, very costly to remove from the 303D list. However, there is a success story where we can have a dam removed and or a fish ladder added. That those success stories have lower bar to get the success.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. Look forward to reading that. Thank you. DOH, Paul? Paul, do you have anything? Paul does not appear to be muted. All right, we'll come back to Paul. Thank you. Department of State, Kate?
Hi, yeah. I don't have a ton. I do want to congratulate Chaz. The St. Lawrence River Watershed Plan was completed recently, so that's a huge win for her up there. We also we're also kicking off finally the Oneida Lake Watershed 9-element plan. So I imagine we will be reaching out to soil and water to be involved in that. Similarly, the Skinny Atlas Lake 9-element plan is starting to finally get underway as the DEC contract for the modeling work gets sorted out. I think Stephanie mentioned it last time, but the Owasco 9-element plan is making progress. I think it's in big part to the soil and water conservation districts for kind of helping to troubleshoot some issues they're having with the modeling. So yeah, a lot of watershed plans moving forward this time of year.
That is good to hear. Kate, is there a website where those plans are posted?
The DOS is redoing their website, so there will be one soon, but I don't know if the current website has been updated in some time.
Okay.
But soon, we've been told soon a new watershed page will be up.
We do have, just to add to Kate, this is Chaz, we do have the St. Lawrence plan on my website. I can send a link in the chat in a moment.
Oh, please do. Thank you.
Yep.
Congrats up there. That's fantastic to hear.
Thank you.
Hey, Brian, this is Paul.
There's Paul. Hello.
Yeah, I got so excited, that it was my turn that I hit the off button instead of the mute button on myself.
Okay. What do you got for us, Paul?
Well, from an ag point of view, that the Watershed Agricultural Council met the last week in January and informed us that that the New York City DEP will be paying for an auditor to come in to look at their books this spring. Until then, they will not be receiving any money for to purchase eased lands or to do any farm projects, install any BMPs on lands. All that money is going to be frozen up until that audit is complete, which it's very unfortunate. Although I got to say, if it's going to happen, probably this year would be the year for that to happen, to have this freeze on BMPs, because the cost of everything is so high. A lot of things we're going to have to go out to rebid because cost estimates have risen so much, and it's very difficult to get contractors signed on right now. So it was not going to be a very productive year anyway. But that is very unfortunate. And that's all I have from a health department point of view. From a personal point of view, I had a lot of comments about the whole forestry plans for the state, but I'll save that for another day. One question I do have is, I recall that there was a lot of emphasis on biofuels, willow plantings and such, some years back, and I just wanted to ask if that's something that's been raised again in current talks.
Yeah, great question, Paul. It has actually. Back in December, Maureen Leddy from Office of Climate Change hosted a bioeconomy subgroup meeting, and we did hear again from Tim Volk, a familiar name from the past, on willow biomass, together presented with Peter Whitberry, who's been doing a lot of work with us on climate and agriculture to talk about feedstocks and the willow biomass potential. So yes, that discussion has come up again.
Okay, that's great to hear. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Anything else, Paul? Any questions for Paul? Okay. Moving on. I have way too many notes going back to my list here. Brian, Rom, Cornell. Brian, Rom, do you have anything for the group? Okay, we'll move on. Beth Claypool, Beth, do you have anything for PPE?
Yeah, no, nothing here. Although I did share, with folks about the cover crop stuff that we talked about in a couple of different meetings. And then also I put in the chat box about our master forest owner program. We are getting more phone calls locally, from landowners wanting to do and how to figure out how to better manage their forests. So I know that, that is a growing concern and more interest definitely. So I like to see that coming up here as well.
Thank you. I did see that in the chat. It was great to see. I'll make sure that our partners at Division of Lands and Forests know that resource is out there. Thank you. Okay.
I was just thinking here, Brian, too, I don't know if there would be any interest in this committee, since we are talking about forest management from a soil perspective, about having someone from that program even, give a 10 or 15-minute presentation about what it is. That, if the committee's interested, I could help set that up.
Yeah, that would be great. Really, really appreciate that. Sure. Thank you so much. Okay. I will go back to Brian Rahm really quickly, see if got anything. Looks like he might have left the
see
call.
him on the call anymore.
Thank you very much. I hadn't looked at the participant list for a little bit. Thank you, Bethany. Okay, Paula, NRCS.
Good morning, folks. I have notes here from Blake. He couldn't make it today. He's at the National Association of Conservation Districts meeting today. So a couple operational things we have going on is with reference to masks, the President Biden's executive order, basically anyone in an FPAC facility, leased or owned, as part of that federal space, must wear a mask at all times, including federal employees, Soil and Water Conservation District folks, other partners and visitors and customers. I know once customers are allowed and visitors are allowed back in, I'll talk about that in a moment. But masks must cover the nose and go below the mouth to the chin. And masks have to be worn even if you're the only person in the building, in government vehicles with more than one occupant, while conducting work in the field, whenever physical distancing cannot be maintained. And the only exceptions are when safely eating or drinking, and for a person who is alone in a private office with floor-to-ceiling walls and closed door. When it comes to travel, in-state travel is now allowed for mission-critical work, so we can start going to other locations. This includes field work and mission work required to travel travel to another office. But employees should minimize actual travel to when they cannot be otherwise accomplished through Microsoft Teams. Customer service. So all of our offices are in phase 0 or 1, which means no customers are allowed in the USDA office space. But employees may choose and visitors may choose to meet briefly with a customer in the building's vestibule, if a vestibule is there, which they call that the little small area or lobby next to the outer door of the building. For office buildings without a vestibule, the local FAC or Food and Ag Council may identify a hallway or other area outside of the USDA space to briefly meet with customers. But the local FAC must come to an agreement about the location and circumstances of that meeting space in place. We do have the Link Pass station for folks that need their Link Pass update by appointments. so it's link passes appointments can be made for the state office link pass station via email. And the services for USDA and soil and water staff only. Official link pass calendar is still closed, so it's hard to get to. So soil and water and NRCS employees can contact Katie Duncan to coordinate a time. So if you need a link pass update, Katie Duncan is the contact. And her email is actually catherine.duncan@usda.gov. And that's the update.
Thank you, Paula. It sounded like you were reading for something official. I'm wondering if you could provide me that for the minutes, and I will try my hardest to get them out in time. So this is good information for everybody to have.
Absolutely, no problem. I actually had it in an email. I couldn't remember who actually takes the minutes, so I have it in an email all kind of teed up to send to you. So
Perfect, Paula. Thank you so much. Are there questions?
no problem.
Questions for Paula? Okay, thank you. Scott Ryan from NYACD, do you have anything for the group?
Not much other than Blanche had sent out the booklet to the legislators for legislative days, and she's got some positive feedback on it from the legislators. So it's a big thank you to the districts that submitted their projects from the past year. That's about it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to dig a little bit again, Scott, on the status of the appointment. So stay tuned. Hopefully I can find an update for you. Thanks so much for participating.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to call on individual staff members, so I will just ask you at this time, any state committee staff, if you have any updates for the committee, please take your phone off mute and go for it. Okay. At this time, I would also offer any conservation districts joining us today on the phone. If you have any questions or comments, please go ahead and take your system off mute, and you can address the committee. Okay, hearing no comments from conservation districts, are there any members of the public joining us today that would like to offer a comment or have a question for the state committee? Okay, Dale, I turn it back to you for the next meeting.
Okay, next meeting date. Brian, you got one proposed a little later in March?
I do proposing a little later to get through the Ag and Forestry panel recommendations. I know that's going to tie up a lot of staff and also the symposium. So looking at later in March, March 23rd, if voting members could check their schedules and see if that works for you.
That works for me, Suzanne.
Excellent.
Good for me.
It looks decent for me as far as I can tell.
Excellent. Dave, I see your phone is on mute, but if the 23rd works for you, you can also go ahead and nod.
Yeah, okay for me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Well, I'll try to get these minutes done well ahead of that scheduled time, and certainly want to thank everybody who presented today, participated today. Really great meeting from my perspective. we even ended much earlier, given that you gave me some time to present today. That's no less than a miracle. But I remember at the end of 2020, December, I presented on some concepts and ideas for state committee agendas. So if you'd like to take a look again at that presentation and maybe get some ideas, I certainly would be open to them. I've been noting some ideas today as well for future agenda topics. So I just, you know, I'm always available to everybody here. Just drop me a line, an email, and give me some thoughts for topics, and we'll make sure we cover those. And with that said, I also noticed quite a few participants that called in over the phone, so there might still be quite a few. If you want to drop me a quick email, let me know who you are and your organization. I can get you on the minutes. Otherwise I won't be able to record it. But that is all, Dale. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, I definitely want to pursue the cover crop discussion and forestry discussion farther as we move along. I know that they're going to be very big in climate programs going forward in the state. Anybody have anything else? If not, I want to thank everybody for participating today. We had great turnout, and stay safe and warm, and the meeting is adjourned.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.